All right, so we are live. There we are. There we are. Well, hello everybody. Let's see, here we are. We have some people hopping on here. We'll give everybody a minute to get connected before we get started. Some people connecting in. There's some more. Well, hello everybody and happy Friday. So here we are. We're not at the bookstore today. We're all hopefully comfortable at home, or as comfortable as we can get. I'm sure we've seen a lot more of the insides of our homes this past year, but hopefully everyone is doing well. Since Bob isn't here, he's watching at home as well. So I'll be reading a couple of announcements for everybody. First and foremost, welcome to our first online astrological predictions. Normally, this is, of course, an annual staple that we do over at New Visions. And given all of the circumstances in the world, we are doing it online. That way, we can still bring this to you. But just remember that all in-person events and forums and all that stuff at the bookstore are still suspended. This is just a special event that we wanted to do. So, of course, we have Pat here with us once again, doing some astrological predictions for the coming year. So let's see. The other thing to let you know that the recording for tonight will be available probably next week, because we'll take that recording, process it, and we'll upload it onto our YouTube page. So you can go onto YouTube and search for New Visions Books and Gifts, and you'll see our page there. And this forum will be there along with a bunch of the other forums. Unfortunately, the video from last year's astrological predictions got corrupted, so we only have the audio, but it's up there as well if you ever want to go back and check that out too. So we have those things available, and there's other Friday night forums on there as well. So normally we get a little handout like this at the forum. So this year, since we're doing this digital, we also have the handout available digitally, and that will be in the chat once we get started, once we hand things over to Pat. So I believe that should be just about everything here that we need to talk about. If you haven't, please donate your $5 for the forum, just like you normally would if we were in person. It's all processed through PayPal, which is secure. If you don't have a PayPal account, you can put a credit card in there. Or if you'd rather donate in cash, you can always stop by the store and just drop your $5 off. A couple of people did that already. So we have those different options available, but we certainly appreciate your donations, and that's always a wonderful thing to keep everything rolling. So I think that should be just about it. And so I think we'll hand it over to Pat.
Hey, Matt.
Hi, Pat.
How is everybody doing tonight? I'm really, really grateful to be able to offer this workshop, this lecture, in this kind of a safe environment, because that's one of the biggest things that's been most important to everyone, especially at New Visions, to make sure that all of our wonderful clients, all of the wonderful folks who come in to New Visions Books and Gifts are able to get the support they need for their spiritual journeys and still be safe as they do so. So I was really pleased that we were able to make this continue to be part of our annual offering at New Visions. Let me start with a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who don't know me, who've perhaps never, never done a class with me or heard a lecture with me, my name is Pat Dumas. I am based in Millersville, Pennsylvania. I was trained in astrology by Bill Trivet, the wonderful Bill Trivet, as well as taking classes with Stephen Forrest, and through Astrologos, which is a fantastic British, actually Australian British, New Zealand British team of astrologers, Bernadette Brady and Darylyn Gunsberg. In reference to what's coming up, a couple of housekeeping things. The handout that Matt mentioned can be found at www.newvisions.com, easily accessed. The last page of that handout, by the way, if you want to print it out, has a notes page so that you can keep notes for what you hear tonight. Other housekeeping, Kara is the wonderful and wise. Kara is also helping out by taking a look at any questions that come up over the course of the lecture. I have built into the presentation a couple of spots that we can stop, take a breath, let you ask some questions. It's a little harder than if we were in person. I used to love the interaction of live people stopping me and saying, wait a minute, I don't understand what you're saying, or asking a question or offering their viewpoint. But please feel free to go ahead and continue to do so if you have one. Simply type it into the chat screen that is available to you. Kara will keep track of them and she'll let me know what your questions are. Let me give you the basic plan for tonight, what our basic outline is. The structure of the talk, we're going to start out with a very brief look at where we've been. 2020 was quite the year, and we are still dealing with much of the energy that was going on there, as well as prepping ourselves to get ready for this next round. So we'll be talking about where we've been, where we're going, but particularly in terms of you individually. You know, how are the energies that are coming about? How are the planetary connections, the aspects, the eclipses, the retrogrades? How do they affect you as an individual? Okay. Then we'll take a look at the specific energies of the interpersonal and the outer planets, the planets from Jupiter out through Pluto. What signs are they in? Where, you know, what are the activities, and how is it going to affect you personally? And then finally, we'll get to the actual specific predictions for the year ahead. The way I do that is I predict for the country overall, utilizing the astrological terms of as Bill used to say, astrologies, utilizing the cardinal ingresses, taking a look basically at the 4 different charts when the sun enters the sign of Aquarius, of Aries, of Cancer, of Libra, and of Capricorn. These are the cardinal signs. Okay, so a couple of caveats before I get going. You need to know that when I looked at the astrology, when I looked at the prediction planning, I'm not looking at these charts from a political standpoint. I mean, I have my own viewpoints, of course, but I am looking at these as an astrologer, strictly garnering the information that I see from the planetary aspects that are in play. I'm not leaning one way. I'm not leaning Democratic or Republican. I'm simply reporting to you what I see. Secondly, I'm a human being and therefore totally capable of screwing this up. So I hope I don't offer you bad astrology. It's never been my goal, but I just, need you to know that there's, I may misinterpret something, though I hope not. I would have liked to have had a couple more wrong last year than I did. And secondly, this is a virtual. First time I've done this virtually, so we're all flying by the seat of our pants. I was laughing with Matt beforehand, and thanks to my daughter, I was thinking we should call this "Sip and Stars with Pat," and then sip a drink of wine every time you hear me say the word Pluto, because Pluto is going to come up pretty extensively during this talk. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. We know that 2020 was an incredibly intense and active year. And while this coming year is going to have its own quite numerative amount of transits and eclipses and other astrological happenings going on, it will not be quite as intense as we experienced in 2020. We had basically 3 major planetary cycles that hit us broadside last year. We started, and they came full circle from January through December. We started in January with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, something that only occurs every 34 years, okay? It brought on extreme frustration. Saturn, that boundaries, you're going no further. Pluto, transformation. So there's this constant need to change while Saturn is hanging on tight, not to change. So you can imagine the frustration in there. The concept, because it was resting in the sign of Capricorn, was to destroy the establishment, take out all of the existing structures and make them unreal, basically. Destroy them completely and start all over. The concept of deep fears, which are always associated when we're dealing with Saturn, and the concept of betrayal, trust issues. These are all concepts that move along with Pluto. Is it any surprise, looking at the entire last year, how a feeling of both sides of the political issue felt lied to, felt as though there were mistruths being shared back and forth? This is totally on target with the shadow side of the planets that we were dealing with. So we saw a lot of those scenarios playing out around us. Some of the more positive versions of it could be the structure put into place to soar, because the positive side of Pluto is that of the eagle, not the scorpion, but the eagle, and soaring above the sullied part of the world. So on those parts of your life where you were able to find yourself rising above it, clap yourself on the back. You handled it the way a beautiful Saturn conjunct Pluto should work. April 4th, June 30th, and then again on November 12th, we had the retrograde motion of Jupiter and Pluto making conjunctions, and these occur roughly every 13 years. They're very unique patterns, and they spell constant opportunities for change. Opportunities, Jupiter, and Saturn, the opportunity for being able to take the Jupiter conjunction of growth and then solidifying what you grew with. It's controlled expansion is how you look at it, basically. But it can also, which is interesting, historically, that conjunction spells the downfall, very specifically, of any person, group, or organization which had total control before or was abusing power. So when we see changes that are in place right now, you could sort of keep that in the back of your mind as to what may have brought about some of the changes. I mean, think about it with Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter is the god of thunder, of the sky. Hades, Pluto, is the god of the underworld. Essentially, heaven and hell come together. That's what the mythological construct is basically talking about. The concept of taking all things hidden, political conspiracies, viruses, and bringing it out into the open and trying to bring it up into a more spiritual level through the connection with Jupiter. The thing that I also found interesting when I was doing my research on this, Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions have actually had a strong connection to viruses and pandemics in the past. I didn't realize this until I did some research. Back in 1918, with the big Spanish flu epidemic, Jupiter and Pluto were conjunct in Cancer, which is the ruling sign of the United States. In January and February 1918, Jupiter, they were traveling together in Cancer, and this flu broke out during that time. It infected roughly 500 million people with 50 million deaths worldwide. The Spanish flu was the first of the two big pandemics with the H1N1 virus. We saw that, we've heard about that, right? We've heard about that recently. It was, the second of them was the swine flu back in 2009. Well, interestingly enough, Jupiter and Pluto weren't conjunct, but they were both in Capricorn. So the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction there really, it caused it to recur, though not completely launch itself the way it has this year. And then in 1981, the HIV outbreak, Jupiter and Pluto were in Libra, and that was where they became conjunct. The last time that I was able to track down the Russian plague of 1771, Jupiter and Pluto were in Capricorn. So that was kind of interesting. That was the very last outbreak of the bubonic plague in Moscow. And interestingly, the same kind of situation of hiding things was happening again, just as it did this time. It broke out in Moscow. The government tried to hide it, just as it apparently was done in China, that it was, well, I don't know. That's the reporting I've been seeing, is that China tried to keep this information from the rest of the world. The same thing happened in 1770 when, or 1771 rather, when this happened in Moscow. And then finally it launched hard when Jupiter and Pluto united at exactly 17 degrees of Capricorn. So it's interesting that this Jupiter-Pluto connection is one that has been around for a while and has been connected with pandemics before. Then finally, we had the great Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December 21st, which was, it kind of brought around full circle the start in January 2020 and ended in December 2020. The idea, it happens every 20 years or so, but except for one brief little foray into air, for the last 200 years, that connection had only happened in earth signs. Now we've moved into Aquarius. So it's moved into air. It begins to talk about huge kickoffs of revolutionary, rebellious thinking that is sometimes rebellion for the sake of rebellion, as opposed to being more humanitarian. We're at the very early stages of this, so we need to find our feet. We need to get our feet solidly planted in this concept of a new way of thinking, new progressive thoughts. And all the current variations in political dogma are expressing this incredible need for change on all levels. So that was where we've been. Now let's take a look at where we're going. I'm going to share my screen now. I think I'm going to try to share my screen now. There we go. And there it is. Okay. And there's that little, I should have had this up, my apologies, but there's the sharing of all of the different places of where we've been through 2020. Now, where are we going? And that's what we need to think about now. What are the transits of 2021 and how are they going to have a bearing on us? Now, I've been putting up, so for those of you who know, I'm going to talk this through in English, but for those who are interested in the astrology, I've also decided to go ahead and put up the astrological maps so that you can see what's going on as well. Beginning on January 4th, we had the Mercury-Pluto conjunction. Sip. This is where intense depth Pluto is connected with our communication, our thinking, how we, our propaganda. It's the background behind uncovering secrets, all of the idea of persuasion, influencing others, also conspiracies. These are all related to the Pluto and Mercury conjunction here at 24 degrees of Capricorn. Now, if it was an individual, I would love to be able to say that, this is a great time for someone to be able to seek out some help. It's a great time to see a therapist, a counselor, to gain a better understanding about like the relationships that you're part of, how am I thinking? How, what is my next step in how I want to create the new me, how I want to grow in my thought process. On the other hand, you can also use your mental powers during this kind of a connection to deceive. This is the Svengali kind of transit. So you have many people have a great power of persuasion during this period of time. I would say you need to be very careful what you say, to speak with truth. To write speech is a good phrase that comes to my mind, because you have the power to influence others. We saw this. This was January 4th. January 6th, Wednesday, when so much happened in Washington, D.C., it was quite ripe. There was a lot going on. As you can see, the sun got even closer. Jupiter is involved, Mercury, Pluto, Saturn. We're all dealing with the intensity of the emotions that are at stake here. Whenever a Pluto transit happens, it uses intense emotion as its catalyst. That's certainly what we experienced this past Wednesday with the storming of the Capitol. In addition, if you notice up here, we have Mars at 29 degrees of Aries. Mars is at home in Aries. It's in its own sign, very strong. 29 degrees of any sign is known as the anaretic degree, critical, and some people call it the critical degree. It's not really, but some people call it that. The anaretic degree of any sign is deeply intense as it gets ready for change. It's looking for change in some way. And since it's Aries, since it's Mars, we're dealing with intensity and anger. So a lot of that really came about. I took a quick look. Where does this play out? Where does this transit play out when I'm looking at the chart of the United States? And it actually played itself out in the house of the legislature. It was back and forth between the 11th and 2nd houses of the U.S. chart, which deals with our values as a country, and the legislature. So not surprising we had an issue on the 6th. Coming up on the 20th, considering we had the 6th with the electoral college certification, I was interested to see that the 20th, Inauguration Day, plays a big deal too. But let's look at this for the standpoint of you as an individual. January 20th has a Mars-Uranus conjunction. Be careful on this day, please. This is a day, whenever Mars and Uranus come together, we're talking about intense bursts of energy. Uranus is the unexpected, the sudden. Mars is power, motivation, drive. So when the two come together, you're talking about haste, accidents, anger, passion, being driven by so many things that can push us over the edge. Be very careful, please, to take your time, to try to breathe when things get too intense, to be able to respond carefully. The thing is, in addition, when we're looking at this particular Mars-Uranus conjunction, we're also looking at an incredibly strong square going on. Squares in a transit chart indicate challenges, indicate pushes for change, indicates we are not comfortable with the status quo. We must make a move. We must do something. There's that itch, that desire to make a change. So the notes that I made here is strife, conflict, challenge, and unrest in Mars and Uranus sign. These involve influences that involve the individual. The sun is involved here. So you are going to feel the need to make personal change. It's also involving the moon, because the moon is over here conjunct Uranus and Mars, and it's squaring the sun. So there's that automatic needs versus wants argument that goes on whenever the moon and the sun are at that difficult kind of a connection. We also have Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto kicked in here, although Pluto not quite as much. It's an out of sign, luckily, thank goodness. But we're looking at these three, the sun, Saturn, and Jupiter, quite close together. So everything is more. Jupiter is more. Saturn is control, and the sun is the self. So I would say that's a day. I would set aside January 20th to chill, to breathe, take it slow. Don't let things rock your world so badly. Try to breathe your way through it. And the other thing that I would say is that things could happen very quickly. For those of us that are Aquarians with Uranus going on, and those of us that are Aries, and Scorpios, things could happen for us, bang, sudden, fast, because those are the signs that are ruled by Mars and Uranus. So I would say be ready for just about anything on January 20th. The next thing that we're going to be looking at on the 31st is the first of the Mercury retrogrades. It's interesting. Mercury retrograde happens roughly 3 times every year. Okay, about 3 weeks of every year, the planet Mercury, which talks about how do we think, how do we communicate, technology, our mercantile ability, how we, business, tech, travel, all of these things. About 3 weeks, 3 times a year, Mercury seems to go backwards. It doesn't really, but it's a visual. It seems to go backwards. And essentially, people have, over the centuries, go, oh my God, it's Mercury retrograde. There's ways to work with it. It's not something to be feared. It's something to think about, because anytime a planet, any of the planets, go retrograde, all universe is asking you to do is go within a little bit. Think a little bit more about how your thought processes are working. Think a little bit more about how you communicate to others. Think a little bit more about how and where you gather and disseminate information. That's especially important in terms of communication this time around, because all 3 of the Mercury retrogrades for 2021 are in the air signs. This first one is in the sign of Aquarius. So there could be communication issues, communication snafus, technological snafus. Your computer could be on the, do some glitching. I would make sure that if you don't have virus software, you get some before this date. It's mostly, think think about opportunities to reset your thinking, opportunities to choose better words when you're interacting with other people. That's really the best way, I would think, to look at Mercury retrograde. As the planet of communication, Mercury retrograde tends to breed a lot of confusion anyway, confusion in thinking. You may find that you think you are being understood. You have said something that is totally misconstrued. So be sure that you are being heard properly, or be sure that you are hearing what someone else is saying properly. It wouldn't be at all unwise to reiterate what you've heard. I think I heard you tell me XYZ. Was I correct? It's not a bad thing. It would actually be quite wise during this period. So it's got rulership over things like speaking, negotiating. In your handout, there's actually a really good list of do's and don'ts for Mercury retrogrades that I strongly recommend taking a look at, especially on January 31st and the other two times. Now, the next one that's coming up, this is not necessarily something that is specifically driving, but take a look at this. Look at all these planets in Aquarius. This is called a stellium. When we have this many planets resting in the same sign, this is known as a stellium. It's interesting that we dealt with the Jupiter-Saturn, the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn back on December 21st in Aquarius, because this is what kicked off the whole concept of having a bit more of a humanitarian thought. This is the kickoff of technological advances, the opportunity to make unconventional opportunities available, great innovation, seeing the other, leveling the playing field, seeing the other guy's point of view. That's what Aquarius really should all be about, rather than the negative shadow side, which talks about stubbornness. We Aquarians, once we, it's really hard to change our minds once we've gone in one direction. So it's, instead of remaining rigid, it's a fixed sign after all. Instead, try looking for the opportunities for growth and expansion. Look for the opportunities to let your mind be more embracing of other points of view. So, great influx of Aquarian energy. As of February 9th, it will be in place for a lot of these signs. For Saturn, it'll remain most of the year. For Jupiter, it'll remain most of the year. Enjoy it. This is a great chance to be able to walk in another person's shoes and to be able to better understand where someone else is coming from. Our next, on February 17th, is the first of three. I don't want to call them difficult. They're nowhere near as intense as the aspects we had in 2020, but they are still intense. Saturn, the planet of hang on to what is the status quo, is making the first of its three squares to the planet Uranus blow apart the status quo. So as you can imagine, it's not going to be the most comfortable position for most people. There can tend to be restrictions in communication, technology, travel. The thing that I find most interesting about this particular one, take a look up here. We have Uranus making a conjunction quite close, as a matter of fact, in Taurus to the moon for this particular square. Whenever we see the moon and Uranus together, it indicates an ability to have a bit of emotional detachment. So it's possible that we'll be able to enjoy bursting apart, shall we say, blowing apart some structures without the emotional upheaval that can sometimes be accompanied with. So I would say take a look at where in your chart does 7 Taurus rest, because that's asking you, the universe is asking you, what structures in that part of your life need to be released and overhauled. Let's say, for example, you have 7 or 8 degrees of Taurus resting, I don't know, the 4th house, okay? You may need to let go of your idea of what tribe looks like, of what family looks like. You may suddenly have a brand new family member introduced to you that you did not expect. You may have an unexpected pregnancy, although that's probably more up in the 8th house. Let's say it was in the 10th house. You could get a job offer coming out of nowhere that could be a wonderful opportunity for you, but scares the daylights out of you. Remember, Saturn is all about fear. So you're bursting apart with a 10th house, let's say a 6th house, 10th house connection, or a 7th, 10th house connection. You're bursting apart the status quo that made you feel safe with the job you're in. But it's got a great opportunity for tremendous personal growth to take this new leap. So that's what's going to be demanded of us with these 3 different Saturn-Uranus squares. We all will be pushed in different areas of our lives to find out what structures need to go so that we can make room for new opportunities. It's nothing to be really too afraid of. Hang in there. It gets better. On May 26th is the first of our eclipses for the year. We'll have 4. 3 of them will be in the signs of they're always in an axis, 2 signs. So 3 of them are going to be in the Gemini Sagittarius axis. 1 of them in November will be the Taurus Scorpio axis. For when we're looking at lunar eclipses resting in Sagittarius, as this one is for May 26th, we're always looking at how do we compare, how do we balance our truth, Sagittarius, with what are the actual facts, Gemini. Because as we all know, those 2 can sometimes be mutually exclusive. So we need to be very honest with ourselves. We need to truly be willing to take a look outside the box of what we believe, at what is real, at what is truth, what is actual factual information. And conversely, we need to sometimes let go of some of the facts and look at what are what's the foundation, what's the emotional foundation of the belief systems we have, our truth. These things, they're all going to rest on this fulcrum tip. Whenever we deal with a lunar eclipse, which is a full moon energy, you're looking at a balancing act. You're looking at how does one activate the other? How do we find the balance between these 2 energies in play? In addition, in this particular eclipse, we're looking at globally, we're looking at a 6th, 12th house balance. So there's this, no matter where it falls in your chart, no matter where these 2 signs fall in your chart, there's a certain pull to this eclipse that asks you to look at the 6th house issues of service to others and service to the divine or to the higher self in the 12th house. Gathering information, Gemini, versus processing data, Sagittarius. Expanding your data sources, growing your data sources in order to get better information to process your information. It's challenging us to learn. It's challenging us to go a little bit further than just being willing to look at the immediate data, dig a little deeper. Is what we're being told real? Should we just believe everything we hear, or do we need to look at another side, another source here, and compare the information? It's also because Sagittarius can be very dogmatic. It's asking us to challenge our most dogmatic viewpoints, challenge the intolerance we may have developed related to those dogmatic viewpoints. Get rid of any prejudice or belief systems that are outdated and not based in fact. That's what we need to take a look at with this May 26th. That's one of the major themes. The fact also, because it's got full moon energy, you're also looking at the concept of ending and releases, culminations, the idea that you have to find the balance between the 2, as I mentioned earlier. So look in your charts. Those people who have personal planets or personal sensitive points in your chart at 3 to 7 degrees of the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, you're going to be the ones that feel that most. So let's see, that would probably be, somebody who was born maybe the first, second week of September. That's early Virgo. That's probably the 3 to 7 degrees in there. But take a look at your own birth chart. This is why you need to have your birth chart done. Where does the axis fall in your chart? That's one of the things you need to take a look at. Where does 5 degrees of Gemini and 5 degrees of Sagittarius fall for you? Because that's where you need to look at where you're feeling most rigid, your most dogmatic thoughts. Let's say you happen to have those 2 signs resting. Well, I'll use myself as an example. For me, those 2 signs happen to fall on my first 7th house. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Actually, it's these 2. It's the 6th, 12th, now that I'm thinking about it, because my rising sign is 18 degrees. So let me put this into English. What this lunar eclipse is going to be asking me to do is to understand where I am not being smart when it comes to my health, 6th house, how I'm being of service to other people, and slighting the amount of spiritual support that I'm giving to myself. These are areas that are often dealt with in the 6th to 12th house. So that's one way of looking at it. The 2nd to 8th, that would be all about resources. Where do you have your most dogmatic belief systems when it comes to what you believe is mine, as opposed to what is ours? Joint resources, 2nd, 8th house. It's a really interesting juxtaposition having these 2 in place. The next part that comes up is the next eclipse, which is the solar eclipse, and this one is in Gemini. Now, when you're looking at the solar eclipse, the difference is you're looking at the same basic themes, the Gemini, Sagittarius themes about information gathering and processing. But the difference is that you're looking at it from the standpoint of the new moon concept. It's a new beginning. It's a chance to be able to look at a new way of looking things, resets, fresh starts. That's what we're looking at when it comes to the full moon or the solar eclipse that we're dealing with. One of the things when I'm looking at this, because it's resting globally, it's resting in the 12th house of the global chart. Guilt seems to come at me. I'm not good enough. What do I know about myself that isn't sufficient? These are the things, because the 12th house rules our psychology. So if we can let go of not being perfect, that could be a really fresh start for us. Now, where does that rest in your chart? Interestingly, 19 degrees of Gemini rests in my first house. I'm going to use myself as an example. So I need to let go of what part of me isn't working anymore and be willing to reach for the better me, to grow, to expand myself, to be the best me that I can be on this journey. So where does it rest for you? In what part? It's also talking about, since we're talking air signs, we're talking Gemini communication, where can you be compassionate? Where can you have more understanding for your fellow man and articulate that? That's another way to take a look at this particular lunar eclipse. The next sign, or the next aspect that comes up that jumped out at me, is the July, actually June 14th came in here, but I'll talk about that one afterwards. The July 13th Venus-Mars conjunction in Leo. This is actually quite a nice one for those who are in relationships. It's quite a nice one for someone who wants to be in a relationship. Venus and Mars together are the absolute most creative option. You must have the masculine and the feminine combined in order to create. If you just have the masculine, all it is the drive, the desire. If you just have the feminine, you're simply the receptacle waiting for the idea to come in. You must have the 2 energies together in order to bring a manifestation to fruition. Okay? So if we're thinking about how this works astrologically in the chart, when we have a Venus-Mars connection, in this case, it's in Leo. So this is fire, okay? You're talking about a really strong increased desire for intimacy. You're talking about an increased desire to be social, but please be careful with COVID. Please be careful. Make sure that you are not throwing big parties. It's just not smart. Your more tender, sensual side gets activated during this particular conjunction. There's a greater joy in being creative. You may find yourself, even if you are, if you're a creative person in general, artistic, musical, what have you, you'll probably find the day before, this day, and the day after this, very, very conducive to being able to create work that you can be proud of your creative body. If you don't consider yourself creative, you are still going to find, even at a general workspace, you're going to want your work to look its best. You're going to want your work to work properly. It's overall a really beneficial time. The Venus-Mars connection is a good one. Increased desire for satisfaction. Even routine work should be more enjoyable with this one. What I would say is think about, where does this house, in what house of your chart does this conjunction occur? If it happens in the first house, you're talking about, okay, how can I look my best? You may choose to go get a new hairdo or a new, I don't know. I'd be wary of a tattoo change, because you might find that that getting a tattoo on this day, a week later, it might not look quite as exciting to you. But something that's not long term would be a great one to think about during this. If you had this particular Venus-Mars conjunction in your third house, you might find that you have an incredible ability to put your point across, to be able to speak creatively in order to gain a persuasive edge. So it might be good if you work in the communication field, or if you need to sell yourself or sell an idea to someone. Might be a good idea to try to schedule it for this date. If it's in the 8th house, oh baby, let's just say set up a rendezvous if you can. And then think about the 10th house. 10th house is all about what is, it's career, of course, but it's also what is my public persona? What is my social standing? So if you're looking at a Mars-Venus conjunction in the 10th house, this is a tremendous opportunity for you to be attractive to the public at large. It's a great time to be able to try to do some kind of business that involves you selling yourself or selling your ideas. Great opportunity. So overall, July 13th should be a good one. It should be a good one. The next one is the second of the Mercury retrogrades. This is September 28th, the third, or the second. This should be the second one. No, it is the third one. In Libra this time. We missed Gemini. Well, when's the last? They're on your handout. You'll have the handout. I think I picked this one because of the other planets that are involved here. If you notice, we've got a really nice Saturn-Sun trine going on at the same time we have the Mercury retrograde. So I think even though there may be some difficulties in communication, we're still looking at a good opportunity for you to think about relationships. Saturn is resting in the 7th house. It's making a really nice trine to the Sun. Putting this all in English, a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Libra will have you thinking more carefully about how you communicate with a partner. Could be an intimate partner, could be a business partner. Both are ruled by the 7th house. We've also started to note that as time has gone on, really strong, intimate, loving friendships are starting to be recognized as 7th house rulerships as well. With that Saturn there, this could be a wonderful time to have deep, deep talks with the person who's important to you in order to solidify your relationship. So it's not a negative. Don't look at this Mercury retrograde as a negative. You could be getting down to the basics on some information in an existing relationship. Now, I would say this is the time to gather facts. It's a good time for brainstorming, for talking things over. It's not a time for contracts. So I wouldn't necessarily launch a marriage proposal or put out, start a business at this time, but I would definitely do the preliminary work, have the deep talks you need to have in order to find out whether or not this relationship is the one. Find out whether or not this business really has an opportunity to be able to gain its feet during this period of time. Follow the difference? You're doing the background work. Then once you're out of the Mercury retrograde period, you can go ahead and make your launch. The next one coming up is the lunar eclipse in Taurus. So this is, whoops, that's the wrong screen. Well, okay. Let's cross that out because that's actually not the lunar eclipse in Taurus. It actually is a screen that is, we're looking at a Taurus Scorpio full moon. It's a lunar eclipse in which you're looking at the balance between Taurus and Scorpio. So that means, how does your money, Taurus, contrast with joint resources, our money, Scorpio? How do what makes me feel safe, Taurus, contrast with what is the safety for everybody? Those are the second and eighth houses. Those are the Taurus Scorpio balancing acts that have to go underway. But we're also looking at, when we look at Taurus and we look at Scorpio, we look at the status quo. Taurus doesn't want to change. Taurus wants to solidify. Scorpio is all about transformation. So you need to find that balancing act, that fulcrum point between, I guess the best way to put it is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Make the change that you can that doesn't destroy everything in its process. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, total destruction. So, you want to make sure you're keeping the good, but making sure you change as well where it's needed to change. A willingness to see and embrace your own dark side. There can be no light without the dark. So you have to be aware of your own shadow side, shall we say. Where are your weaknesses? Where do you need to have some strengths bolstered? Scorpio can help you understand that. Taurus, if it allows you to, if you can get past the stubbornness, Taurus will help you build strong structures. And then finally, be careful about the concept of selling your soul. That's a Scorpio thing too. Taurus and Scorpio together, sometimes there's such a need to keep the status quo. You'll tell yourself anything you have to hear in order to not to make that change, not to take a chance, not to risk. So this is a period where you need to watch for those opportunities, or watch for those instances where you tend to do that and cause yourself problems, cause yourself to dig in places where you don't need to dig in. I do apologize. That is the wrong screen. I thought I had checked all that today. December 4th is the solar eclipse in Sagittarius. Oh, good. This one's right. So we're back to the themes of Gemini and Sagittarius, the idea of our truth versus facts. Okay. So this one rests in Sagittarius. So we're looking at the idea of, where are we processing information, and from what data are we choosing the very best sources? It's interesting that for this particular one, we're resting in the second house globally. Okay, so there's this, no matter where it is in your chart, there's going to be this overall feel of looking at the facts and looking at your beliefs as it relates to your resources, your belief system, what makes you feel safe, secure. All of those things are second house issues. So you're going to be wanting to take... Oh, excuse me, I beg your pardon. Sorry about that. You're going to be wanting to look at where that needs to be examined and how best to deal with those changes as they come up. But again, because it's a solar eclipse, you're dealing at resets. You're looking at a new moon feel, so you can start something new. You can be willing to have looked at all this and make a new stand. Be willing to look at new information as it comes in. So really what you need to look at for this particular one is, what axis is activated in your own chart? Where, which of these houses in your chart are you going to be looking at your belief systems, where you don't feel safe or you do feel safe? Let's say it's the 5th, 11th house that your Sagittarius and Gemini tend to rest. Well, that can feel, where do I not feel like my creative output is of value? Where do I not feel good enough to be able to put my own creative output out there for the world to see? That could be what's going on if you have this particular solar eclipse going on in your 5th and 11th houses. And finally, this is the final Saturn-Uranus square. When we are dealing with 3, you're talking about a retrograde action. The first one hit earlier this year, second in the summertime, the third one is here. So we're looking once again at frustration, at groundbreaking activity that can come forward, slow progress towards achieving goals that we wanted to achieve. In this particular setup, we're looking at the idea of Saturn here in the second house, making a square to Uranus in the 5th. So we're talking about, again, creative energy and value systems. I think you'll have had this energy come to fruition by this point at the end of the year. It'll be this understanding of the structures that you were able to let go of to allow your own freedom, your own true inner self, which is what Uranus is all about, to come through and to launch forth. So I think by that point, if you've done the work over the course of the year, this could be a really good opportunity for you to be as much of yourself as you can. All right. Do we have any questions so far from this for this particular section of the lecture so far? Oh, there we go. Karen, do we have any questions, or Matt?
I think so far we're good, Pat, actually. We're looking through the chat here.
Just giving some people some time to ask if they need to type, especially if they're typing with one finger on their cell phone.
Indeed.
Here we go. Corby Mitley. Corby, can you hit a yes or no in the chat box if I'm able to post this to the feed so we can see your profile, and this question will be in the video that will be published on YouTube? Yes or no? If not, if no, we'll read it out loud.
Right here.
All right, question. Assassination attempts likely on 120? Question mark. Clearly, there will be mega riots in major cities. They've already.
That's a good question. Let me go back and look at the chart again. I didn't get the feeling of that. I did get the sense of, hang on 2 seconds here. When you print out 38 pages, it gets to be crazy. Hang on. January 20th.
Wrong one. Jumped up. This is her question, Pat.
I would see a lot more 8th house activity. I could be wrong, Corby. I could be wrong. I don't get that sense. I do see conflict. I do see violence. And that would be, we'll be talking about that more in the predictions section part when I start talking about the US stuff. This section was more, I really wanted to tie you guys in individually. I would say, hopefully not. And I don't lean towards it. I hope that's a decent answer. But with Uranus and Mars, anything is possible. Okay? I think that's the best way to answer it. I think we have more concerns later in the year than January 20th. And we'll be talking about that. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think
others?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let me go back to where we were. Oh, we got another one?
Yes, we do. I think, again, when people are typing on their cellular device, it takes a little longer here.
Fine.
Allison, do I have your, let's see here, it says, how does one navigate pre-scheduled events, i.e. legal issues, etc., that are scheduled around the 20th? Seems like an ominous time, however, we can't always choose not to participate in what may be quote-unquote unsafe situations.
That's very true.
That's a very good question. That's very
and it's like with the whole concept with dealing with not getting into contracts during Mercury in retrograde. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you have to rely on universe. The thing that I've found most to be true when it comes, the 20th I'll come back to, like, for example, when it comes to the idea of a Mercury retrograde and signing a contract, what you can almost bank on is that there will be something screwy with the contract. Something will come back. You might have to re-sign it. One example that I had, when I signed a contract during Mercury retrograde, they had my middle initial wrong. So the contract was void. I had to redo the whole thing. That's the kind of energy you're looking at. With the 20th, I would say, with the 20th, it's more the concept of being as careful as you can. This is not a time to drive and text at the same time. Okay. People think, oh, I can get away with it. Don't take chances like that. I mean, you shouldn't anyway, but let's face it, people do. This is not the day to do that. This is not the day to do that. I would say be as be as proactively careful as you can, and trust in deity, trust in spirit for the rest. It will unfold as it's meant to do. If you have done the best you can, if you put the energy out to the universe, something may change. You may have, all of a sudden you'll get a phone call. Gee, I'm sorry, we can't meet. Can we reschedule? And you may be totally surprised that the universe allows itself to unfold in your favor. Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you, Pat. We have another question from Denise and from Rachel. Thank you, Denise and Rachel.
Okay.
They both said that you started to mention June 14th and then skipped over it.
Yep, let me go back to June
This is for
14th.
two people on the
handout because that'll give you a better idea. Okay, that's the second Saturn-Uranus square. And if you remember, the Saturn-Uranus square was the concept of frustration. But it doesn't have to be. That's the beauty of astrology. The negative energy, it's always possible to utilize that. But what about if we made the change consciously to make it positive energy? Okay, so if you wanted to make that Saturn-Uranus square work for you instead of it work on you, then why don't you plan something that is going to require a new start that requires a new structure? Perhaps it would be a good time to launch, if you happen to have either Saturn or Uranus resting in the 10th house of your chart. And this, I'm sorry, I know I'm getting a little astrologies here, but if you have either of those two planets resting perhaps in the 6th or 10th house, which work with your work environment or your actual job, that could be a good time to start a new team, to get a new team underway or a new goal into place. Because Saturn rules Aquarius as well as Capricorn. And Aquarius is all about setting goals for the future. Uranus is already in the future. So if you wanted to start, let's say, a new website, that might be the thing to do if you feel like you have to have that energy working for you instead of against you. Utilize technology as a new start, create a new structure, but understand that you may get frustrated. That's the whole key. There's an aspect in astrology called the sesquiquadrant. I know, bless you. But its whole energy is of frustration, all of a sudden giving way to flow. That's the kind of energy I feel with a Saturn-Uranus square. It's frustrating, it's demanding change, but ultimately, if you don't fight it, you will be pleased with what comes of it. So make it work for you instead of against you. Try to arrange around it using the energies that you can. Okay?
Okay, and I have one more question before we move on. For those in the chat that maybe have questions about the astrologies or about what house anything is in, you recommend getting a natal chart reading or a progress chart reading? What type of astrology reading do you suggest someone to get?
The very first chart you should always have done is a natal chart interpretation. Any other astrology work that is done for you is based upon the natal chart. Your solar return, in other words, every year an update for what's coming up for the year. Your a vocational chart to look at what's the best career I should be involved in. Looking at relationships, everything stems from that natal chart. It is your blueprint. It is, if you believe it, you know, I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I tend to believe in past lives and how it shows up in the chart. Having a knowledge of your birth chart is your instruction manual. Not having your chart read and trying to navigate your life is kind of like pulling out this really involved piece of machinery and then just being handed the key and told to go start it. If you have no idea how it works, then the best you're doing is banging your head against a wall and getting very frustrated. If you have a knowledge of your own birth chart, you know what your gifts are, you know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are so that you can bolster them and make sure that they have support. You know one of the things that a lot of people always laugh when they realize there's some parts of your life that you can make a snap decision, no problem at all. Other parts, you'll sit there and dither till the cows come home. And I'll have people say to me, this makes no sense. This is not the way my mind works. I said, it is the way your mind works based upon this area of your life. That's what understanding yourself can give you. The validation and the permission to be you. That's what I would start with, always, is a natal chart interpretation.
Okay, and then if they've already had that and they're going to see you, would you do a progress chart? Or what chart would they need to do if they're seeing someone other than you? Because they maybe have another astrologer they're working with.
Well, any reputable astrologer would want to know that you've had your natal chart done. For me, if I know the person who did your natal for example, if you had your natal interpretation done by Bill Trivet, I would have no problem going ahead and working with you on your chart. If a reputable astrologer has done your first natal interpretation and you understand yourself fairly well, then any reputable astrologer should be able to take a look at your chart's annual update. Right around your birthday, you'll have, I do the annual update, which involves a solar return, where the sun comes back. Let's not get too astrologies. It's a look at the year ahead. It's a look at what are the inner drives that are pushing you to make change. Those are your progressions. What are the outer activities that are pushing you to make change? Those are the transits. And all that simply means is that there are parts of your life that are coming together. There's outer influences and the inner influences that are all working together sometimes, or at odds with each other sometimes. It depends on how your chart is laid out. But that's any valid astrologer should be able to look that through with you.
All right, and I'll just give you one more question. We'll go back to the wonderful information. I want to make sure, Valerie, I'm understanding your question, so I'm going to relay it to her, but I want to make sure that I understand it correctly. Valerie says, do you do these charts with someone? I think that means, I'm interpreting that to mean that she's asking, do you do this chart, a natal chart, with an astrologer? That I wasn't too clear in understanding that question, but if that's what you mean by who you do it with an astrologer, how do you do so? The handouts that we included in the link have Pat's information and phone number at the top. You can call and schedule with her for a private astrology reading. So hopefully That's the answer. I want to make sure that was a little bit, I want to make sure that was the right question that she was intending to ask. All right.
I would recommend that you do it if you can't. You know, if you're just learning astrology for yourself, it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole. One of the things that when I teach, I laugh. When I talk with my students, they'll often go looking for the weirdest things, the most strange aspects in a chart. I call them, if you hear hoofbeats, don't automatically assume it's zebras. You know, it could just be a horse. You know, it doesn't have to be a sesquiquadrant making a connection with your, parallel sun and moon. It could just be, okay, as of today, you are having this pull about wanting to do something, the moon, with what you need to do, the sun. It doesn't have to be any more aggravating or weird than that. So I would say try to get, if you are not a student of astrology yourself, try to have it done by a reputable astrologer.
Perfect. And also just to clarify for Valerie, I believe she said, sorry, she meant, will you come up with a chart with me if I would like one done? And I believe that is maybe misunderstanding what a chart is. And that's maybe just the definition of what a chart is. It's something that you don't create it for them. It's actually already in.
It exists. It's already,
stars, so to speak. You're printing out a snapshot.
Right. Your birth chart is a snapshot of the heavens the moment you drew breath. That's why it's absolutely imperative that to do a good astrological chart, an astrologer needs to know the exact birth time. We need the birthplace, the birth time, and the birthplace, birth date. Birth date is always good. The date and time are important because that's what fixes it up in the heavens. That's what tells us where the planets were in the heavens. The birthplace is important is because it brings it down here onto Earth and gives it a corporeal place on the Earth itself. Those three triangulated bits of information are what are needed to paint your birth chart. But that's another whole talk that we could do. If you wanted to send me some questions, we can put my email address up, and I'll be happy to answer those. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Let's go back. Here we have, oh, wait a minute, I gotta move my other stuff out of the way here. I'm going to look now briefly at the big guns of the zodiac. We're looking at, whoops, wait a minute. I suppose it's good if I, from this slide. There we go. Can you see me now? Okay, this is where we are at. In your handout, you'll be able to take a look. As of January 1st, Pluto was at 22 degrees of Capricorn. By the time the year ends, it will be at 24 degrees of Capricorn. Moved a whole lot, didn't it? Two whole degrees. Not even quite 2 whole degrees. Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn on January 26th,
I'll just
2008.
interrupt you for a moment. We don't have your screen on there.
Oh, well, that's not cool. Wait a minute. Let's go back. And let's share the screen. It's weird. Where is it? Application window. Why is it not there? There it is. Can you see me now?
There we go.
All right.
There we are.
There we go. And there. We full screen, Matt?
Yeah.
We're all good.
Whoops. So Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008, and it will be here for another few years. It'll be there till January 2024. It entered for good in November. It has a half of the year Pluto tends to be in retrograde, that feeling of being backwards. So it entered for good into the sign of Capricorn as of November 2008. There'll be a brief period where it bops back into Aquarius in 2023, but it will stay in retrograde for another 5 to 6 months until January 2024. Pluto represents power, all the different manifestations of power, personal power, power over others, need to strengthen your own inner power, your personal power. It really works so strongly on an emotional basis. And it really is important to make sure where Pluto rests in your chart, you need to know where you sometimes take advantage of the power you have over others or where you give your power away. These are the two biggies that I try to get across to my clients. Now, you noticed how slow this planet lasts. It's the most outer, and yes, I'm sorry, it is a planet. It is not a little dwarf. It is a planet. The reason the planet moves so slowly is because its effects are massive. As tiny as the planet is, the effects and the changes that it brings about are massive in scale. It takes a long time for this transit, for when it moves and connects with your chart, to have an effect. It takes a long time, sometimes several years, for this planet's transit to occur. And it takes months, up to a year, for it to fade out. That's a lot of time for change to come into existence. Okay? So you're dealing with sometimes a big setup to get yourself ready to make this change. Therefore, it's not going to be taken lightly. I would say whatever house in your chart, whatever of those 12 pieces of pie your chart has Pluto going through, when it has finished going through that house, it will never be the same again. It isn't going to go further than two or three houses, 3 to 4. Let's put it that way, depending on where in the world you were born. That helps decide how large the house is. And its speed varies. That's another thing that is interesting. It has an elliptical orbit, not a round one. So it goes faster through some signs than others. For example, the fastest sign that it traverses is the sign of Scorpio, the sign it rules. It can take between 10 and 20 years to go through a sign. It depends on what part of the orbit it's in. So it's because of the shape of the orbit. It's because of the amount of the distance from the sun. It's because of all of these things that Pluto's changes are cataclysmic. Pluto coming through your 7th house. If you are married, your relationship with your partner will not be the same by the time it is finished. If it was a solid marriage, it is deepened. It is strengthened. If it was a relationship that wasn't meant to be, it's over. It's as simple as that. That's how Pluto works. Pluto coming through the 10th house. When you start Pluto coming through the 10th house, your career, you could be doing one thing. And by the time it finishes going through that part of your chart, you could be doing something completely different. I had a client who started out as a dental technician when her Pluto was going through the 10th house. By the time she finished, she was a life coach, helping to make other women, she specialized in women, helping other women find their strengths in their lives. It wasn't that she didn't like what she was doing. She just knew it had to change. And the dental person that she worked with, their business ended. She had nowhere to go. She had to make a change. And so she chose that. Just know that no matter what part of your life, Pluto is going to cause total change, irrevocable change, and often difficulty in terms of intense emotion as its catalyst. The Pluto squares, where Pluto is at a 90-degree angle to a strong part of your chart, itself, let's say Pluto squaring itself, that can happen anywhere between the ages of 36 and 61, depending on the orbit you're in. Sextiles, which is a 60-degree angle, and that's a more beneficial one, is at about 30 years, roughly about 30 years. So you will never experience a Pluto return. The United States is in 2022, but we've been around a little over 200 and some odd years. It takes 248 years to go for Pluto to go all the way around the chart. So as you can imagine, a living individual is rarely going to experience more than a Pluto opposition. Mine, interestingly, those of us that were born in the 1957 range, 55 to about 58, ours is occurring at roughly the age of 60, somewhere in there, 55, 50. Mine is going to be, 80 something. I'm going to be 87 when my Pluto opposition happens. So it's interesting how it works out. It forces you to accept major change. It forces you to accept major change. And the harder you fight it, the more painful it is. You cannot get around a Pluto transit. You can't get over it, under it. You have to live through it. That is the only way to make it work. Now, for this particular year, because Pluto happens to rest at that 22 to 24, somewhere in there with a little bit of variation due to the retrograde motion, people who were born at 22 to 27 degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra, the cardinal signs, you're going to be the ones who are going to feel the challenge, the square energy most during the course of this year. Obviously, the closer it is to your sun's, that's when it'll be more felt. Those of you who have 22 to 27 degrees of Taurus and Virgo, you are probably, those are other earth signs like Capricorn. You may find gifts becoming available to you, easy flow, the opportunity for building to happen for you, because we're talking about Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo, earth signs, the second dimension, so to speak, making it real. So for those of you with strong suns, Mercury, inner planets resting at those signs, this could be a really good year for you. And opportunities can present themselves for those of you with signs at 22 to 27 degrees of Scorpio and Pisces. This is the sextile, the 30-degree angle. Wherever there are sextiles to Pluto offers great opportunities for you to be able to step into your own personal power. This is one of the reasons why I love to do astrology charts for people to look at the year ahead. I'll always point out this is an opportunity for you if I see a Pluto sextile, but you've got to grab it. You got to reach out with both hands and take it, both the sextile and the trine, the easy flow and the opportunities. If you don't grab them, they're just going to fly on by. The squares, on the other hand, are going to make themselves felt. You won't have an option. You will make that change. Next, we come to Neptune. Neptune is in Pisces right now. It's in its own sign, which it loves. It's very comfortable here, very comfortable here. It started the year at about 18 degrees of Pisces, and it's going to finish the year at 20. Again, a slow-moving planet. Neptune takes 165 years to go all the way around the chart. So it came into Pisces in April of 2011. It's going to be here for another 4 years or so, till about 2026. It's very much at home in its own sign. Those of you who have Sun in Pisces, those of you who are Piscean, maybe have noticed over these years that you've been able to be more creative. You've been able to have a sense of spirituality come to fruition for you. Those of you who perhaps are in Virgo may have been feeling the opposition going on, may have been feeling that energy of being pulled in directions you're not comfortable with towards creativity. Not feeling as strong or as vague, maybe feeling vague about your spirituality, unsure of your own belief system. That's the energy of the opposition. Let's say wherever Neptune is traveling through your chart, the energy that it has, Pluto is nuclear energy, nuclear explosion. Neptune's energy is more like the Colorado River cutting stone. It's that dissolving energy, that eroding energy, never-ending erosion. So let's say that Neptune is traveling through your 6th house of health, daily routines, service to others. If its energy is that of dissolving, of confusion, of vagueness, the 6th house talks about health. This could be a period of time for you where you develop these weird illnesses that your doctor can't seem to nail down a diagnosis for. That's a very common Neptune in the 6th kind of activity. Let's say it's going through the 7th house. If you are in a spiritual partnership with someone, this could be incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for? Positive, not positive. I can't think of the word. Forgive me. My Mercury is banging up against Neptune right now. So it's a period of time where you are able to have the best of yourselves come together. Neptune has no boundaries, okay? So if you are in a Piscean kind of spiritual relationship, you may find it difficult to see where you begin and the other stops. Now, that is a positive thing, provided neither one is taking advantage of the other. This can also be a period of time when you are not having good boundaries, where those of us who are empathic are having a very difficult time being able to let go of energies, of emotions that aren't ours. We become sponges. We absorb what seems to be all around us. There are ways to deal with that. There are really, really good ways to deal with that. You can take some time to spend time in nature, give that energy literally back to Mother Earth. Stick your hands on the ground. Tree hugging is for real, guys. Put your hands around a tree. Give that energy back to the tree, back to Mother Earth. She can mutate it. She can take the energy that you're feeling that you think is going to be destroying you, and she can mutate it into something that is more transformational and useful for her. It's also a period of time when you have Neptune coming through a part of your chart where you're really not meant to do anything. You're meant to dream, think, plan. And that can be hard because, especially in Western culture, it's pushed into us. Perform, get something done. That's what we've been told we have to do. But where Neptune is in your chart, you're not supposed to do anything. You're not seeing things clearly. You're not getting all the information you need. Things could be cloudy, and it's not a good time to make some really good decisions. So definitely have a good sounding board, someone that you trust that can be your someone to bounce ideas off from. I think I heard this. Is that what you picked up? Ask somebody, talk to somebody, utilize a good partner in this particular period of time. Neptune is going to be retrograde between June 25th of this year and December 1st. Whenever you've got Neptune retrogrades, it's really a good time to go ahead and go within, be spiritual. Really get into meditation. You'll be amazed at what you'll learn. If you're interested in the tarot, it's a great time to utilize tarot as a meditative tool to help you see that symbology, even more clearly than you would have not when Mercury's in retrograde. You'll see more and get more information gathered through nonverbal communication when Neptune is in retrograde than when it is direct. What I would avoid I would avoid running away. I would avoid anything that is an escapist kind of activity. You can lose yourself during a Neptune retrograde. You don't want to do that. Okay. Next, we have Uranus. Uranus has been in Taurus now since March of last year. Moved out of Aries, where, if you remember, up until March of last year, you had about 6 to 7 years of the universe demanding of you to be you. It was militant about you not living somebody else's life, but instead living the life you were meant to lead. And then as of March of last year, suddenly just laid back a little bit and said, okay, you did that. Now it's time to build. Now it's time to solidify and stabilize yourself. Build your security of this person that you have now made yourself become. So Uranus is in Taurus from March of last year until roughly April of 2026. It takes about 84 years for Uranus to go all the way through its cycle, to go all the way around the chart. Not surprisingly, it's roughly the same thing as a human lifetime. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, by the way, was June of 1934 through May of 1942, when World War II was going on, when the Spanish Civil War was going on, FDR's New Deal, the beginnings of public work projects, and the birth of the Third Reich. Look at those echoes today. Interestingly enough, I was listening to NPR last week sometime, and it was funny because I was thinking about the New Deal and the CCC, the Citizens Conservation Corps. There is in the state of Pennsylvania, one of our state senators wants to reinstitute the CCC to help deal with so many people being out of work through COVID, to help deal with being able to give people jobs, being able to give people a meaningful bit of work, and at the same time, getting the conservation of our planet pulled together, get ready for the climate changes that need to be addressed within within our country, in the physical part of our country. So I found it really interesting, these echoes of 1934 to 1942 and reiterating themselves now. Uranus is the planet of revolution, of technology. It can be powerfully destructive. Its energy, if Pluto's energy was the nuclear blast and Neptune's energy was the erosion of a river against stone, Uranus is Zeus's lightning bolt. It's like, pow, it's change. When you think about it being in the sign of Taurus, it can be a little unnerving. It's the idea of taking all of our concepts of security and blowing it up. But look at it from the positive side. What banking reforms needed to happen? In 2008, we had a terrible banking issue. Now with Uranus and Taurus, we can make changes that are being sure that never happens again. We are able to establish a whole new idea of how we deal with international commerce, international economies. The focus is on banking, the world's economy, weather patterns, because Uranus rules weather as well, weather shifts and changes in mundane astrology, the astrology of governments in the world. It's not a comfortable mesh, these two planets, but if we can let them work together, we can actually get through these years of Uranus transits by letting go to any attachment of what we believe was, what had to be, what was, and instead sitting back, having faith that the universe is going to make us ready for what will be. Uranus is in the future. So Taurus can help build what will be. I think the biggest thing that I want to get across to folks is the knowledge that we can't fear anything that we're dealing with this year. Fear stops progress. Fear stops us from reaching out to each other. So we need to swallow our fear, buckle up, and reach out a hand instead to our fellow human being. In this particular case, not having this need for things to remain the status quo, allowing Uranus to make the changes that are necessary. Uranus heralds lightning fast, intuitive leaps, by the way, too. When you have bursts of brilliance, look at the amazing technological changes we made this past year in putting together this virus vaccine. What normally takes 10 years, 10 to 15 years of research, study, testing, piloting, we did in 10 months. If that's not Taurus and Uranus together, the physical body and Uranus technological leaps, I don't know what is. Taurus has an intense desire to create concretely and foster growth in the physical and stable world. And Uranus wants to give us great leaps and miracles. Have faith that universe has our backs. Oops, I didn't mean to go to Saturn yet. Hang on. Finally, when we're looking at, let's go back to Uranus. When we're looking at something that was interesting when I looked at last year's, one of the great totems of looking at Saturn and Uranus together is thinking about the fact that Uranus's son castrated him. Mythological Uranus was castrated by his son Saturn, or also known as Kronos. So just as Uranus lost the maleness, there was tremendous birth of beauty through Aphrodite, which Aphrodite sprang forth from Uranus's genitals hitting the ocean. Sorry, it's a little graphic, but that's what the mythology talked about. So at that time, I was thinking, will we see an end of the masculine death grab on power yielding to the feminine? Look at how many women we had running for office in this country for the 2020 election. And look at the fact that for the first time, we have a woman of color as this Vice President of the United States to be sworn in on January 20th. I think it's remarkable how, as above, so below, how astrology plays itself out here on Earth. The people who are going to feel the most change with this Uranus and Taurus setup are those with sensitive points in their charts from roughly 4 degrees to 11 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. These are the fixed signs of the chart. Fixed air, fixed water, fixed earth, and fixed air, water, earth, fire, fixed fire. We're going to feel the challenges most, those of us with the fixed suns and the fixed signs. Those of you who have 4 to 11 degrees in Virgo or Capricorn, for example, your Sun, your Venus, your Mercury, you're going to feel that sense of flow. You're going to have a much easier time of dealing with bursting change that you can build something fresh from, the Uranus and Taurus energy. And then finally, those of you with 4 to 11 degrees in Pisces or Cancer, either the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, these are where there's going to be unexpected creative or spiritual opportunities that come your way. The sextile offers opportunities. Flow comes from the trine. Challenges come from the squares. We have Saturn in Aquarius. That came in with the Saturn-Aquarius conjunction in December. It entered in December of 2020. It will be here until March of 2023. Saturn's cycle. Saturn is the first of the last, I should say, the outer planets that were first seen by the ancient astrologers, and it kind of indicated the boundary of the universe. If you see, they likened the rings around Saturn to the boundaries of how far we can push ourselves outward. If Jupiter is all about expansion, Saturn was all about, okay, calling it here. It takes 29 and a half years roughly to go all the way around your chart, or all the way around the zodiac. So that's why at about 29 and a half years, everybody has what's called a Saturn return. And I laugh because I tell you, okay, now you know exactly every single way that the universe can kick your butt. That's what Saturn's all about. Making it real, showing you where your boundaries must be. It's the great teacher, the great teacher. The last time Saturn was in the sign of Aquarius was in 1991 to 1994. Try to think back on those years. What was going on for you, 91 to 94? What events or themes were the big picture items in your life at that time? Now, 29 and a half years later, Saturn will be pushing you to address those same themes again and ask you, how have you grown since then? Did you grow? Did you do the work? Or did you just say, oh, good, thank God that's over. Now I can let it go. And now it's going to kick you in the butt again. So think about that. Think about that. What was going on in 91 through 94? How have you grown? Because it's interesting. Saturn in Aquarius is a totally different taskmaster than Saturn in Capricorn was. Saturn in Capricorn felt like the old 19th century schoolmaster with a book in one hand and the hickory switch in the other. And you knew exactly when that hickory switch was going to come down. Saturn in Aquarius is a little bit different. Instead, you're thinking about the forward-thinking teacher who utilizes manipulatives and video in the classroom and role-playing to help you understand how, how history worked out. The kind of teacher who brings all of the different options available for children to learn, leveling the playing field, making that learning opportunity available for everybody, but is just as much of a taskmaster. Saturn in Aquarius isn't going to let you get away without an ounce of lazy behavior, but it's going to be much more forward thinking for you. Does that make sense? So the energy of Saturn in Aquarius will be the need to not put control and order up against nonconformism. These are sometimes seen as not working together, but Saturn rules Aquarius. I think because Aquarius knows you cannot have change unless you have changed the structure within. You'll see most of the rebels try to blow the structure up. The reformers will change the structure from within. And that's how Saturn represents itself in two different ways in Aquarius. It's a period on a personal level for all of us. It's really a time of challenging our identity, changing our perspectives. Why do we do what we do? What is it that motivates us to do these things? It's about creating safe boundaries for ourselves, figuring out, okay, this is as far as I want to go. Where's the edge of the envelope? And maybe pushing it just a little bit more to see what's on the other side. Maybe not take that leap, but see what's on the other side. And they counterbalance each other, safety and a little bit of reckless danger. Saturn, when Saturn is going through the houses of the chart, it's asking you what structures need to be destroyed, especially in Aquarius. What needs to be, let go of and rebuilt, what needs to be examined, what needs to, what roadblocks have to be lifted. It's a very challenging time when Saturn comes through because it asks you to be real. Saturn is more than anything else the planet that is not going to let you hide from the truth. It's like the mom. I always love using this. It's the mom who walks into the teenage boy's messy bedroom, takes every drawer, dumps it on the floor, pulls everything out of the messy closet, dumps it on the floor and says, all right, straighten this out because you're forced to start from scratch and rebuild your structures. So whatever house it's going through, that's what the energy will be for you over the course of this year. Let's say, for example, that Saturn's going through the 7th house of your chart. You are going to be asked to really examine the one-on-one relationships that you have working. Legal relationships, business partnerships, marriages, intimate relationships, deep friendships. Which ones, they don't necessarily end, but they're going to change. They're going to either deepen and strengthen, or they're going to be picked apart, evaluated, tested, challenged, judged. Generally, the effect of Saturn transiting the house is felt in a more pronounced way at the beginning of the transit. As you become more used to the energy, you start to be able to work with it better. You start to recognize it better. You get in the habit of being disciplined. You get in the habit of disciplining yourself instead of the universe doing it for you. So I would say that, by the end of the period of time of that Saturn planet, that energy going through that sign, that house of your chart, you will realize you have mastered, if you've done the work. This is all key. If you've done the work, you will have mastered that part of your chart. The people that are feeling it a lot for this particular period are those with any of their planets at the 0 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio through about 12, 13 degrees, somewhere in there. It takes about that, about that amount of time. You'll feel the most challenge in that period. My sun is at 12 degrees of Aquarius, so I'll be feeling it this year for sure. But don't fear Saturn. Saturn is there to help you make sense of your universe. That's the biggest thing I can say to you. Make a friend of Saturn in your chart. Finally, we have Jupiter. Good old Jupiter, the planet of growth and expansion. Jupiter as well is in Aquarius. It moved in finally as of, because there was a little bit of a retrograde. It did have its bump there in December with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but it moved finally in December. And it will be here right through December 28th of this year. So I'm not going into a whole lot of Jupiter in Pisces. I'll deal with that next year. For most of this year, let's just talk about Jupiter and Aquarius. It's a 12-year cycle. Every 12 years, if you notice, you have a whole new learning cycle, a whole new chance to be able to understand how something works. The first through 12 years, everybody learns the same basic things to get by in life. 12 to 24, we start to take our interests, and that expands our learning a little bit more. And by the time 24 finishes, we think we know it all. By the time we hit 36, where we've had the third Jupiter return, we realize we don't know anything. And then from 36 to about 50, and then 50 to 60, 62, we start to see all these different ways that we expand our knowledge, that we have faith in different things, that we have a whole new learning cycle. Jupiter returns are exciting times because it opens up new opportunities for us to expand our knowledge base and to expand our ability to process data in a different way. Jupiter gives us permission to dream big. It tells us where we need to have faith in ourselves. Where it's traveling through a sign, wherever it transits, this is our opportunity for growth. If Jupiter is coming through your 4th house, there's a chance for your family to grow, literally. It could literally mean new people coming into the family. It could mean you learning more through genealogy about your family. It could be a better understanding of your emotional foundations, because that too is what the 4th house rules. If it's going through the 10th house, you could get a big leap, a big opportunity in your career. You could get married. You could become a mother for the first time. How you are seen by the public is all the 10th house. And when Jupiter comes through, that changes on a grand level. It's a harbinger of hope and optimism. That's what Jupiter is all about. And it's hope and optimism for the future, which is what Aquarius is all about. So if there was ever a year after having come out of 2020 that we as a whole need hope and optimism for the future, it's this year. So I think universe had that in mind when they went ahead and made this available to us. What Jupiter is going to be in retrograde between June 20th and lasts until about October 18th. What you shouldn't be doing when Jupiter is in retrograde is trying to do something that you weren't meant to do. Jupiter is all about your destiny. If you are in a job that you don't want to do, that you don't want to be in, that isn't pushing you towards where you were meant to be by the end of this year, you'll know it, you'll feel it. And things you should be doing is stepping back, reviewing, taking a look at what your objectives are for the year ahead, looking at what are your goals. Again, Aquarius rules the future, Jupiter rules dream big. It's a great year to be able to, even during retrograde, to assess your plans for the year and see where you've met the needs and where you haven't. It's also a good time to think about your personal philosophy. That could be your religious belief system. It could be your actual living philosophy about how do I approach the world in general. So all of these are good opportunities for you. And again, any questions?
All right, let's see if we have any questions pop up in the chat here. So far, it looks like we don't have any, but of course, we got to let the fingers do the talking here.
Well, in the meantime, as a fellow astrologer, do you have any questions for
No?
yourself? Anything?
All right, let's see.
I would say comments. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And I know Bob's out there watching. We can all wave at Bob and send him emojis and just really give him some
My
praise.
blessed
Him and
birthday
David.
brother.
Yep. And Matt for all they've done for the store this year.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. Recognizing that things had to change and you had to meet a whole new method. That's what kept things going. So good for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
And everyone's support. So everybody continuing to come in and see us, and we've been really grateful for that. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
it looks
folks.
like we
Yeah, no questions.
Yeah.
All right. And now we come to the part that actually goes a little bit faster. Here are the predictions. I want to stress again. I really want to stress again. This is what I see in the charts. This is what the astrology tells me. I could be wrong. You want to remember that the energy of the chart can be something that is worked with, as opposed to having it work on you. I want the one thing that I'll say this now, and I'll say it at the end as well. How you meet challenges has a great deal to do with how the energy works itself out. So I would say, as you listen to these predictions, think about what you can do to shed light, to be the light that you want to see in the world, to expand love, and to reach out to those less fortunate. It's a year of great challenge ahead, but I don't necessarily believe that it's a year where everything has to go to hell in a handbasket. I really don't think so. I don't believe the universe is built that way. We have to be ready for change. That's what's coming. All right, so share the screen. Application window. There we go. Share. And predictions for 2021 from current slide. What this means here by cardinal sign ingress, as I mentioned at the beginning, traditional astrologers, mundane astrologers, medieval astrologers, those who first started all of this, the way we would take a look at what is supposedly coming up over the year ahead has to do with what the maps, quote unquote, of the ingresses, when Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra all start, when those signs begin during each point of the year. The cardinal signs signal change. So the first one we look at is the one that just passed on December 21st of last year, the cardinal ingress, to see what's coming up. So not surprisingly, from December 20th until March 20th, when Aries kicks into gear, high and huge focus on the leader of the country. No big surprise here. I mean, anybody who can't figure that one out has been living under a rock. The health of the country will continue to be poor, unfortunately. A lot of trouble, a lot of unsettled circumstances surrounding healthcare in the country. This, I swear I did this before January 6th. The astrology of this particular ingress indicates a huge increase in mob mentality, uprisings, militant agitators, difficulties that are based on the masses taking up arms and fighting back. This is not going to end until March 20th. And even then, there's going to be some bleed over into the next period. Interestingly, the leader is at odds with the masses, and currently our leader is indeed at odds with at least half of the masses, a slightly 49% of the masses, so to speak. It's an indicator when the sun of the chart is in a difficult position with the moon. That's what brought this up, and it is in square, so there is a deep challenge there. I see that there's a weird financial struggle. Finances do fine, but there's a huge gap between Wall Street and Main Street. I mean, it's one thing to talk about being well invested in the stock market. The average Joe who works maybe at a Target or a Walmart doesn't have any money to invest in the stock market. They're not seeing any of these advantages. So there's a real dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots that is really emphasized by this particular ingress. And considering the issues with COVID right now, it's not at all unusual to expect this kind of difficulty. Difficulties for the elderly. Again, we're looking at nursing homes, at vaccinations being able to be given for COVID-19 to the elderly in nursing homes. I think the difficulties for the elderly, those who are infirm in general, Saturn is the planet that's at play here, and it deals with those who are the elders of the society, but also those who are structurally not necessarily sound. So when we're dealing with difficulties for the elderly, this could be financial, this could be health-wise, and it could even be value system-wise. They could be feeling left out. They could be feeling isolated. What elder in elder care in a nursing home is not feeling isolated right now. Next up, we have the idea of continued struggles between landlords and the masses. I saw, when I was looking at the chart and I saw this, wow, talk about, the fact that as of the end of the year, we had the rent freezes, or the eviction freezes dissolving as a result of the end of the year. So that was reflected as well in the astrology. However, despite all of this difficulty, it is a beginning of a positive period for the government, not the leader, the government itself. So I think if we can get past January 20th with the inauguration of a new administration, we should hopefully be able to get onto a healing path. At least that's what the astrology seems to indicate. There's positive recognition of strides that are made on an intellectual, scientific, and literary basis. I think what you may find, what I was looking at and what surprised me, is that I think there's going to be some amazing novels written during this period of time, or that are published during this time, based upon what we are dealing with, what the human experience has been. There could be breakthrough novels. There could be amazing self-help books that come out as a result of this. But Mercury, literally, Uranus and Mercury activities are strong. So I think we're going to continue to see great leaps in scientific innovation, and I think we're going to continue to see good literary outcomes come from this particular period. Now we come to the next period, which is the Aries ingress from March 20th to June 20th. There's continued focus on the country's leader, which is, again, not surprising. We have a new leader in place at that point in time. So there's continued focus on the way the leader interacts with the country. We have next coming up, it's a positive time, though. It's a positive time for the leader. There seems to be good rapport with both the country, better rapport with the country, and much better international relations as a result of this leader. It's good for potential legislation, but I want to stress something. This period is. We start to get challenges later on in the year. So not that Joe Biden comes to me for astrology, but if he did, I'd say do your best. Don't waste your time with the legislature, with Congress, on things that are unnecessary. Get your legislation through now. Do it now during this March 20 to June 20 period, as much as you possibly can, because this is a better time for success in being able to get legislation pushed through. There's a tremendous amount of activity that's going to be going on during this period of March 20th through June 20th, dealing with trade deals, dealing with international trade as well as within the country. So I'm thinking in terms of being able to maybe get labor unions on board with ideas for expansion and dealing with getting things underway again in an economy that's been so terribly destroyed by the pandemic. It's not always easy. It's going to be one of those periods of time where it's a challenge, but ultimately could end up being very positive. A lot of activity is really what I'm seeing. The next thing I see is, again, technological and scientific breakthroughs. I think we're going to see a lot more. My guess is that we're going to see a lot more medical breakthroughs based upon the rDNA vehicle that was utilized for the vaccine for COVID-19 being able to be used in other treatments and other pathologies, which really is exciting. I think we're going to have, unfortunately, some continued conspiracy theories going about. The difference is that some of these are going to be specifically regarding the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States. The reason I see that is because the leaders are involved. And for this particular ingress, Venus, ruling women, is conjunct the sun. And that immediately said to me, aha, Kamala Harris. So I think we may see, this comes back to remember this during this period, May 26th, Gemini, and June 10th, Sagittarius eclipses. Please, 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 I beg of you, look for the facts. Don't just assume the first thing you see is the truth. Look for the facts. Don't believe everything you're told. Research it yourself. Okay? Interestingly, I really saw strongly some Mercury activity going on here. I think we could be dealing with some kind of a labor strike that deals with either telecommunications or travel. I know that there's a lot of activity going on right now with trying to determine the social media activity platforms and, if not legislation, at least who's going to control who utilizes what. I think we may start seeing some legislation or some difficulties that are related to that activity. This is the period of time where we could actually see a fracture of the GOP. We could see it either breaking apart into different factions or a complete overhaul. Nothing happens that fast. I'm leaning more towards a fracture that will eventually come to fruition into a new, if not a new party, a newly focused party is maybe a better way to look at it. But I do believe that the Republican Party is going to hit some major changes during the March to June period of time. There's going to be drawbacks and difficulties related to hospitals and charitable institutions, and I think a lot of this has to do with fallout from the pandemic. We have not yet seen the worst of this pandemic. Buckle down. It's going to be a rough 6 weeks. By the time this period starts, we're going to be seeing how the infrastructure has been embattled. Don't be surprised if you see doctors and nurses leaving the field. They're burned out. They're just totally burned out. So there may not be enough people to do the work. There may not be enough resources available in the hospitals to be able to pay for the materials that are needed. We may need to see charitable institutions reorganize themselves in order to be able to provide what the country needs. But definitely I see healthcare as getting impacted during this period. There could be a potential increase in behind the scenes under hidden stuff. Again, increases in conspiracy theories, underworld crime, mob mentalities, things that are done in secret, bubbling to the surface. And the one thing that I won't say it was the most disturbing, but it was definitely a surprise to me. Even though we are going to be on a better footing with most of the of foreign dignitaries, foreign agencies, don't be surprised. Watch out for some kind of a foreign power to gain an advantage of some kind. And today, when I was sitting there pondering this and meditating on it, the thing that hit me, we may see exactly how deeply the breach that we experienced the internet breach, we may see just how deeply that infiltrated our system, and it may come to the light during this period of time. There's going to be a scandal related to divorce courts or legislation causing women to lose ground. What this made me think of, it made me wonder if there is going to be some kind of legislation that denies women, maybe family leave doesn't come to fruition, which makes it harder for women. Maybe there's going to be some, because of the health issues, maybe there's going to be some weakening of Roe v. Wade. I don't know. But I do know that the courts are going to be involved. The judicial system is going to be involved in some kind of legislation for which women are going to lose some ground. So be ready for it, and we're going to have to be ready to counter it. Now we enter the next section, which is the Cancer ingress of the sun. This is June 20th through September 21st. This is a really beneficial time, according to everything I'm seeing here. It's a really beneficial time. It's promising for the leader of the country. It's promising for the people at large. Judges and religious leaders are in better shape. Public health is improved. Amusements are in better shape. But think about it. This is the period when people can get out more. So even though we may be at the very tail end of the pandemic, we may be starting to seeing if we can get the vaccinations underway and in a timely fashion, we may start to see herd immunity being built at a better pace, and people are able to be outside, so we can have some kind of social interaction again where we couldn't during these colder months when people are inside. But overall, it's in general a lovely time for the country. Jupiter is making a very nice connection with the sun, and that's always good for the country. There's going to be an event of some kind that promotes or improves our international profile. Now, whether that means that there is either POTUS or VPOTUS makes an important international trip, or an international leader comes to our country, I'm not sure. Some kind of rapprochement is going to happen between an international entity and the United States that will be positive in general. I predict also during this period of time, we're going to start seeing our first marked improvement in the jobs numbers and unemployment numbers. We're going to see agricultural economy improve. We could see mining economy improve. The reason for this is that there's some strong activity in the fourth house of this particular chart, and the fourth house deals with the land. It deals with the country's work ethic. I also predict, back up. Let's go back one here. I predict movement forward in regards to, when I say infrastructure legislation, I mean buried infrastructure, roads, pipelines, sewer systems, bridges. The infrastructure package that has been trying to get passed for God knows how many years now, I think we're going to actually get some movement forward on that based upon the strength that's going on in the fourth house of this chart. I also, however, on the flip side, predict some huge strike, and it could be quite violent in nature, or a change dealing with, I think, either police officers or peace officers in general for their unions, which is going to require reform. Not surprisingly, we're talking about the summer months. These are always the most difficult times for inner cities dealing with racial disturbances. And it's not at all surprising that we could start seeing some problems again, as we did last year. And the other negative that I can see is that there's either going to be the overturning of Roe v. Wade, or very serious inroads that are made to weaken it substantially in the courts. We've seen it coming. We have a conservative Supreme Court now. So we have to figure out how we deal with this. We have to figure out how we're going to handle working with this particular energy. Also, hospitals and finances surrounding healthcare are going to suffer. Is it possible that there'll be a repeal of the ACA? Or will there be, I mean, my daughter actually brought this up. Is it potentially that we're going to start the idea of Medicare for all? It may not be comfortable for people. So, I mean, I'm not sure. I can't nail down the feeling that I've got with this, but I do know that I think what we're looking at more than anything else, truly more than anything else, is simply the cumulative fallout of what the pandemic has done to our medical infrastructure. It is really killing our emergency rooms, our hospitals, our nursing, doctor, and support staff, our emergency technicians. It's just tough, and I think we're going to really see it come to fruition and come to a head during this period of time. Now, don't get scared. But this period, the Libra ingress, is going to be a very hot period. I say this, and I don't say this lightly. I really had to think about how I wanted to put this forth, because I have no desire to frighten people, but neither do I have any desire to sugarcoat things and have you not prepared for deep energies that could be, hitting us during this period of time. I think the best way to look at this is to think of us as resting on the fulcrum tip between annihilation or transformation, between allowing what could be uncomfortable change as opposed to horrific, horrible fighting against it change. There are indicators throughout this particular ingress of a lot of societal upheavals, the idea of major power struggles. There's a tremendous amount of Pluto energy here. Terrorism based upon conspiracy theories, propaganda, overall corruption that comes to light, major accidents, explosions, fires. These are all possible with Pluto resting at the apex of a T-square with Mercury and the moon. What does that mean? You're looking at incredible, tense challenges with intense emotional transformation pushed by the masses and pushed by fast-acting activity, Mercury and the moon. So take it slow, take a breath. We'll get through this. We always have. We've always survived. We survived last year. We can survive this year. So take a breath. The thing that's weird about this particular ingress is that there's so many contradictory, at odds with each other, trends that are showing themselves. Literally, some aspects of this chart are fantastic, showing great strength for the leader. Others showing that government is going to fall apart. There's some really disturbing stuff in here as well. I think what we have to be is ready for anything is really the best way to look at this. I think that that POTUS should look out for any kind of, I use as an example, a renewal of the Hunter Biden scandal, only because it appears to be something related to salaries or money or finances related to him, not himself. The scandal won't be related to the leader himself, but to those in his sphere, if that makes sense. So I think we might see some kind of stuff bubbling to the surface that he has to deal with. One thing that concerns me, be wary of some kind of an accident or an attack on a public building. I realize that's a fairly nebulous concept. That could be something as simple as a gas line break, or it could be a terrorist attack. Who knows? I want to instead push towards the concept of let's make this as aware as we can during this period of time. Be careful. Just be careful. Be sensible. Try to make energy transformative so that it doesn't seek an outlet into violence. Try to not fight change as it's presented to you so that the energy doesn't seep around you and into the destructive, if that makes sense. I say to my clients all the time, there are the people who make things happen. There are the people who watch the people who make things happen. And there are the people who sit there and say, what the hell just happened? Don't be one of those, especially in this time. If we as individuals can do everything we can to embrace change as much as possible, to be willing to be uncomfortable and accept transformation as it comes about, then we are using the energy instead of allowing the energy to happen to us and to our country. Does this make sense? Try to be as proactive with the energy of transformation and change as you can. Try not to fall into the pit of betrayal, trust issues, power struggle grabs. All of those, fighting those, are what's going to make it harder for the country to absorb this kind of energy. I think there's going to be an upswing in public health in a good way. I think we're going to finally maybe see, if not the end of the pandemic, because who knows, the way this is working out, it may be something we have to deal with year after year. But we are, I think, going to be healthier as a country overall by the time the fall comes around. Watch for the possible passing of a Democratic Party elder. This is where Corby, I'm not saying an assassination. It's possible. It could simply be someone passing from old age. I predicted this last year at the time John Lewis passed. He wasn't assassinated. He simply passed. He was an elderly man. That could be what we're looking at. But this will be a party elder of consequence. So the reason I say a Democratic Party elder is because it's going to be someone who is currently in power. We will have the White House, we will have control of the House, and we will have control of the Senate by the time this period comes around. So this would be a Democratic Party elder. Make sense? This is strength for the leader. This is a good time for the leader to get things done, but they're not necessarily popular. Wow, what a surprise. There's going to be a lot of dissatisfaction with the masses. You cannot please everybody, especially as divided as we are right now. But we are going to try, I think, we're going to see as much healing of the nation prior to this period as we can. Right during this period of time, again, that concept about unjust laws for women, healthcare issues, it keeps bringing me back to Roe Wade. I could be wrong. I hope I am, because getting rid of Roe v. Wade isn't going to get rid of abortion. It's just going to get rid of safe abortion. But at any rate, regardless, I think what we're going to be looking at is unjust laws that are related to women, causing a lack of satisfaction with the leader. At this point in time, we're going to start seeing more delays getting things done. This is why I mentioned Mr. Biden should definitely, and Ms. Harris should get things underway as soon as they get into office. Those first 100 days are going to be tremendously important to them, because this is where we're going to start getting into roadblocks. Travel is going to increase again, I think, because public health is better. The pandemic is receding a little bit. But the thing that is interesting that I saw, yes, travel increases, but as a result, so do mishaps related to travel. So I'm not saying plane crashes, horrible things like that, but I think there's probably going to be cases of, oh my God, there's people traveling again. We're not used to that. And there'll be delays, things of that nature. Interestingly, issues with the Postal Service came up, or issues with anything dealing with communications. So that makes me wonder, is this where the internet legislation that has been bubbling all year long might start coming into fruition? Do we start seeing someone or somebody trying to put forth legislation that starts to hamper our ability to simply express ourselves over social media? It's a possibility. There's definitely going to be something to do with information going back and forth. Oops, sorry about that. Back up. And positive strides, I believe, are going to be made in terms of communication, education, philanthropic situations, religious institutions. There's a lot of good Jupiter energy at work here. So you can see what I'm saying. There's lots of positives and lots of bad negatives that are going on. So how do we find the balance? You know, I sat there as I was preparing for this lecture, and I was thinking, how in the world do I put this forth without scaring the daylights out of people? Well, it occurred to me that I think I would do this in the same way if the USA came to me as if it was a client. let's say the Uncle Sam representing the United States of America said, Pat, I'd like you to do an annual update for me. What's my year ahead? This has been a hell of a year. I want to know the next one's better. Well, I thought that might be the smart way to go, because when I work with clients, I want always to make sure that a client never leaves my office anything but empowered and aware. So if the USA was my client, this is what I would say. You know you had a hell of a year. You know that 2020 was a year of intense transformational change. You are not the person you were when you first came to my office at the end of 2019 looking for your year ahead. You knew that with a Pluto return coming up in 2022, it'll be next year, not this year, but next year, 3 hits of a Pluto return. There was no way that your basic foundations could not be, I wouldn't say under attack, although it feels like that, instead under renovation. And the harder you hang on to what is, the more pain you will feel. So instead, let's look at the energy of releasing is important for you this year. USA, you need to let go of the people and the beliefs that are no longer serving your destiny, that are no longer making you a better nation, person, and putting you on the path that you were meant to be on. I would say that, don't be surprised that you feel drained, that there's a loss of physical vitality, that there's a feeling of why bother? If, nothing is going to help. Considering this pandemic that we've been dealing with, there's a physical drain from illness, but there's also an emotional drain from just loss and such incredible challenges we've had to face. Honor that. Be gentle with yourself. Know that this is normal. What is happening is you are getting ready for a new push, a new transformational change. Know that there is what you've been feeling is a weight of responsibility to your tribe, to your family. And that whole change is causing a change in how people are perceiving you. You are not seen the same way you were in the past, USA. You are not perceived with the same either respect or the same derision, depending on how you've managed it. But your message is not received the same way it used to be. Don't assume that it is. Don't just figure that, oh, well, as of a new administration, I'm going to be loved again by the world. That's not how it's going to work. You must re-earn your place in the world. The biggest challenge for you is to not fall into old habits. When change comes, the hardest thing going down a rutted road is trying to not let those wheels fall into old habits, fall into old paths, but instead push new. That's what you need to do. Avoid old patterns. You must accept that you're seen differently than you used to be seen. You must know that you can't fall into the old patterns you were in. And you must honor the fact that your emotions are going to be incredibly high. You have dealt with an awful lot of pain and grief and change, and what you perceived, if not real, still perceived to be great betrayal and breaking of trust. Be ready for the fluctuations and shifts that come with that. Honor them. Be gentle with yourself. Take a breath. Take a beat. Do your best to breathe through the discomfort and the changes. The whole key, whether you're the United States or whether you're just you or me, if we have done the work, if we have taken what energies were thrown at us and didn't stick our head in the sand and instead made the changes, the adjustments, learned, grew, listened to each other. If we chose the high road, then we have the chance of being seen and being in the more positive light. But the only way that this is going to work is to let go of the old structures, the old habits, and the old belief systems that held us back. We are not who we were when 2020 dawned. We're not. And we never will be again. If we try to go back to that, there's nothing but pain waiting for us. Instead, embrace the changes that are here. Don't be afraid, everybody. Don't be afraid. The universe has your back. But you are expected to make the changes that are needed. You will shine. Trust me, you will. But you got to do the work. And with that, are there any other questions?
Let's see here. I think that one thing I always talk with people about whenever we're talking about Pluto energy is I equate it to lava rolling down a hill, that it's slow and steady and it will indefinitely transform everything in its path. But the power is the thing that if we resist that power, then it's going to feel like it's taking everything from us. Whereas if we embrace it and utilize it, then that power can be a beautiful transformation. And that's really the difference. It's all about that perspective. It really, really is.
That's exactly what it is. It is all about perspective. So it's, you know, our job, all of us, our job is to look, to be aware, to look at the changes, at the signs that are out there for us, and be ready, roll with the punches, but also get up and stand for what needs to be stood up for. And there was nothing else. If there's nothing else that I can get across to you during especially the 3 eclipses that are involved in Gemini and Sagittarius this year, do not just believe what people tell you. Research it for yourself. When you choose to believe something, make sure it's because you did the work. Otherwise, you're just being spoon-fed, and you never know what's on that spoon.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite ways to work with that process is to go in and say, all right, I have this particular position on something. Let me see if I can disprove it. Let me see if I can find something reputable to prove me wrong. And that vets that whole position. And that can be a very valuable piece of insight.
Choose to look at a different news source. Try to understand what the other side is looking at. See a new perspective.
Yes.
One of the things, I'm going to be retiring in the next year from the day job. Thank God. And honest to God, one of my big goals is to work on helping educate the public on the difference between news and commentary. We are no longer in an age where the news is simply read. We are given news with their perspective. And it's, you know, it's frustrating because now we're at a point no one knows what to believe. So we need to start ferreting out the information and learn to make those choices for ourselves and not be sheep.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pat. And if there's any other questions that might be asked, we can absolutely see if Pat would be able to answer them in the chat or in the feed, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
All right.
I hope that made
well, thank you, Pat, very much for the evening. Yeah. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us again this year, and this is once again it's always an illuminating and informative experience to be able to see what's coming up for the year ahead, so we can see what the stars have to say with of what's going on in the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So thank you all very much for joining us. Again, this video will be available about next. It should be probably Monday. We should have it up, if not before then. If you haven't made your $5 donation for the forum tonight, you can do so through the link that we have available there. It's also, I sent out an email today with the links for this video, as well as the the handout and all that stuff. The handout will also be available on Division's website. You'll see it right there at the very top of the website. It's on the bar at the very top there. That it will say the handout, so you can access that stuff later. We'll also have a link for the video that we've done tonight. Will also be there on the website, so you can get everything from New Visions books, and Visions is plural and books is plural .com, which is our website. So Pat, thank you very, very much once again for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. This was weird. Luckily I was able to pick up on some energy of people as I was speaking. So I thank you, those of you who tried to connect with me, because it's weird not having people's eyes to look at through this process.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you all.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll hopefully see you in the store. Take care, stay healthy, and stay well, and we'll see you later.